back talking with Dr. Kenneth Hicks, who is an instructor here on the campus of Rogers State University. Dr. Hicks, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that may seem unfair to the viewing public. You will know where I'm headed with this, so just kind of relax. I'm not going to put your feet in the fire. It would be totally unfair of me to ask you to predict what's coming. But have you any sense of where we're headed as a country based on what's unfolding in the nation's capital right now? And how solid is the republic?
I think the republic is still on fairly solid footing, but there are a couple of pathways we can head down. First and foremost, we have to get back to a point where people are speaking the truth to their voters. If we can go down the pathway of truth, then I think we're going to be okay. Republicans should recognize that they have a natural advantage in electoral politics. They don't have to rely on fantasies to win elections. If they are willing to simply compete fairly, in the electoral arena, they'll do fine. Or we can continue going down this path towards unreality, which the story you were talking about before the break was about the QAnon conspiracy theories. And we have elected just now 2 people who gave voice to QAnon conspiracy theories. So we now have a QAnon caucus in the House of Representatives, which is a terrifying thought.
Gun-toting. I might point out we have gun-toting caucus.
Yes. And we had members of the Oklahoma conference that were refusing to go through the metal detectors heading into the chambers. We have a history of people with guns in the House and the Senate, and there is a reason why people shouldn't. There were norms that forbade that. We had throughout the 19th century we had people pulling guns on one another in the midst of political debates. We have to relearn those lessons, I suppose. But again, it gets back to this reality. We are either going to be a reality-based political community, or we are going to continue to be fed by conspiracies. And right now, a significant percentage of Republicans believe that Donald Trump was cheated in the election because he's told them so over and over again. There is no evidence of that, but they are cynical about politics, and therefore, again, when people become cynical, they don't care about facts. Facts are just things that are meaningless to them. And
when something else that fuels the fire, and I don't want to take you into state matters, but I can't not mention this. We have in the governor's office a man who decided to sue the Indian tribes for more money when the solution to financial problems were at hand. He just didn't want to rile the feathers, if you will, of some of his corporate donors, meaning oil corporations.
Sure.
And everybody, and he knew how the outcome was going to wind up. He knew he would lose that case, and he spent a lot of money getting it there. That's one thing. The other thing is I am deeply troubled by the enabling on the part of our elected officials that's been ongoing for the last 4 years. And the third thing, we got one young fellow who's kind of new to politics that I saw a news clip with him just last night, who questioned why can't we just why does anybody want to pursue this? I don't understand. And George Washington, go back to George Washington. He owned slaves and they didn't pursue him. That's right. If you really don't like the letter of the law, then the next time they bring in a murderer, let's just say, well, that's already over with, and he says he's not going to do it again, so we're not going to pursue it. Kind of defies logic, doesn't it?
Yeah, to me, I think, in the current environment, you have to have accountability. Everybody talks about, I listened to the impeachment debates yesterday quite carefully, and the common theme among Republicans opposing this re-impeachment, if you will, is that we need to heal. Well, when people are victimized by crimes or when people are harmed, the first thing that typically happens is that they are made whole. And I think that we need to recognize that there has to be accountability for the people who have deluded a significant proportion of the American electorate.
Do you feel like it's time to do away with the Electoral College?
I think the Electoral College creates it is part of the problem, I'm afraid, because it creates a minoritarian pathway to the presidency. It's interesting that in 5 of the last 6 elections, you've had Republicans losing the popular vote, and yet they've won 2 of those elections. And that really kind of encourages Republicans to say, well, the votes of California, New York, and these other places where all these, effete illiberals live don't really matter. What really matters is the heartland and the South and the Midwest. And, that really does bring us away from the idea of the principle of one person, one vote. The fact that Wyoming has 2 senators and receives equal representation in the Senate, where they only have a population of around 570,000 in the whole state, whereas California, with close to 40 million, also only has 2 senators. It creates an imbalance. I would like to see either significant reform to the Electoral College or its abolition.
Altogether, and I think I would strongly support that. It seems to me like, too, there's been a major push with the gerrymandering issue, where they've tried, attempted, and in some cases pulled it off, to eliminate the possibility of minority voters making it in to cast their ballot. Discouraging. Of course, this country has a history of that anyway, which brings me to another thing, speculation on your part. Mm-hmm. Do you suppose we would have seen the same sort of standoff approach to the demonstrators that took over the building in Washington had they been part of the Black Lives Matter movement?
I think the evidence suggests that Capitol Police would have been a lot more aggressive if there had been 10,000 Latinos or 10,000 black protesters outside the Capitol. I think there would have been a lot more force mobilized a lot more quickly. I don't think they would have gotten into the Capitol grounds without a significant amount of gunfire and people being killed. I think that the summer protests and how police responded to those protests offers a suggestion or evidence in that regard. Now, at the same time, part of the problem with those summer protests from law enforcement's perspective was that they were the object of the protests. And so they took that to some extent personally. I think many law enforcement officers did.
There are all kinds of rumors as we tape this on the 14th, flying around this country, and some of them coming out of Washington, that there were people involved in the White House that knew this was coming, that knew the strength of the people that were going to be on hand, and really enabled them to do it. That's still under investigation.
Yeah, there are reports. In fact, there are members of Congress who are calling on an investigation of other members of Congress and their staffs. There is a Democratic member from New Jersey, I believe, who has basically reported that there were tours of people who came to the protests that were they were basically being allowed into the Capitol the day before to basically reconnoiter the building. It appeared that some groups of the protesters understood the building in a way that seemed suspicious. There were some instances where members of Congress basically said that their panic buttons had been ripped out of their offices. So there are some disturbing bits of evidence coming out, and again, we don't want to succumb to rumor and conspiracy. conspiracy theorizing. What we really need to do is have hearings and have a fact pattern established.
That's a very solid statement to make. I do believe what my dad used to say years and years ago. You don't ever want to do anything where you're going to have the FBI on your trail, because they will get you. They're a thorough bunch, even after all the shots that have been fired at them and all the damage done to that agency. They're still very good at what they do.
Absolutely.
Final question. Give me a 30-second answer here. Years from now, let's say 25 years from now, how will you explain this to the young ones in your class if you're teaching?
I hope I'll be explaining it, if I'm still around teaching, that it was sort of the apotheosis of this period of extreme polarization, and that over time the strength of our Constitution and Americans' commitment to rule of law overcame our polarization, and we began the long, slow pathway to identifying a means of mutual respect and consensual governance again.
Dr. Hicks, we're out of time. Thank you for yours and for sharing your time with us and your expertise, and hopefully we can do it again down the road.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you folks at home for joining us. We'll see you next time.